Hi, this is Kendra Little from Redgate's DevOps Advocate team. And today I'm going to show you a little bit about working with the Git command line with the SQL Change Automation extension for Management Studio. So we are going to simulate and actually do just starting a fresh new code base from an existing database. So what I've done already is I've created a copy of the pubs database. This is a classic Microsoft sample database on my SQL Server instance. If you'd like to play along, you can create your own copy of pubs and do all of these steps by grabbing the pub sample database from the SQL Server samples on Microsoft's GitHub repo. So this repo contains the Northwind and pubs databases on them. I used the instapubs.sql script to create the pubs database. I am using a repo myself hosted in Azure DevOps, and you can create a new organization, a new project, including a Git repo in Azure DevOps, all for free. So what we're going to do here, I'm just in a project I have open. I'm going to create a new repo, and let's go ahead and we will name it pubs. I'm going to leave it totally empty. I am not even adding a README to this. I'm just creating an empty repo, and then I'm going to clone it to my local machine. I'll add the code to the repo on my local machine. So now when I go to repos here, I am in the context of the pubs repo. You can have more than one repo in a project, so just make sure you're in the one that you want to be in. And to clone it, you have a couple different options. Mine is starting out totally empty, and then I'm going to add the code. So I am just going to copy this URL for cloning it to my computer. And then in my PowerShell here, I'm going to clear out PowerShell and we'll go up a little bit. Let's look at our directories here. I've reset myself. So in my local folder, I just have a local folder named Get. I currently in there don't have a folder for pubs. I have a folder for another repo I have that's based on the Stack Overflow sample database, but I want to clone my pubs repo into this directory. You can download the tooling for Git online. It's totally free and easy to download that. So I'm going to say Git and then clone and then paste in that URL that I got. And if any authentication magic needs to happen, it would happen here, but it knows who I am, and it says, by the way, I have cloned this into a folder named pubs, and by the way, it appears to be an empty repo. That's a useful message if you weren't expecting it to be an empty repo, but notice now I have a folder named pubs, and it contains a little hidden folder that has all of the magic stuff for Git behind it. So I want to change my directory into that repo so that now when I issue commands for Git, I am in my pubs directory, and it uses that little invisible folder to say, hey, which repo am I in? So I can now check my status using git status, and it says you are on the branch master, and you haven't really done anything in here yet, which is what we expect. So let's add some files that we can commit. We're going to do that with SQL Change Automation. Back in Management Studio, I'm going to open the SQL Change Automation extension for Management Studio, and we want to go ahead and create a new project. If you've already been using SQL Change Automation to create migration scripts in Visual Studio, you could use an existing project here, but we are just starting out from scratch with a new database, right? In our case, we haven't been working previously in Visual Studio. We're doing new work for the pubs database. I am going to set my project folder to the pubs folder, right? Because I want to keep this in that repo. I cloned the repo to cgit pubs, so I'm going to set that as my local project folder. And then I need to tell it who my development database is. In this case, my development database is that pubs database that we created. And so I'm going to click next. If I have things in this database that I don't want to put in source control, I can filter them out. We want to put everything in pubs in source. And now it says, if you have an existing production environment, if you have existing code, you aren't starting from scratch, you may want to create a baseline, right? You probably do if you have an existing database. Now, pubs is an existing database. It's fictional, but we have a fictional production environment. So we are going to create the baseline schema just for the pubs database that we created. If this was a real database and I had a development environment that was different than production, I would want to get a copy of a production backup to restore to create a baseline that represented production, right? If development was different. In my case, they're the exact same, so I can just use pubs to create the baseline. And it says I created in the 1.0.0-baseline folder, I created a script representing all of the objects that are already in pubs. And it created related programmable objects and an offline schema model. These help represent the state of the code base so that you can do things like compare your source control to an existing database. So that all went successfully. I'm going to go ahead and click check for changes there, and it just checks and says, hey, has anything changed in your development database, right? My development database, it says, by the way, here's what you have it set to. You can change that anytime you want. There's no current changes. All right, well, let's say we want to commit those to source control. And clear out my terminal window. That's just to make it easier to tell what's new in here. And I'm going to run git status again. And it says, by the way, now you do have some untracked files. You've changed some files that you haven't added to Git yet. And I find the command line really friendly. It says, by the way, to stage these, you want to use the git add command. Right? So untracked files are present, use git add to track. So we are going to do git add. If you want to stage everything that has been changed in here, you can use the dot. Say git add everything. Now this doesn't commit it, it just stages it. And if I run git status now, it lists out, here are the files that you have staged. They can be committed. You aren't locked into it. If you want to reset them, you can. And it even helps say, by the way, if you want to unstage some specific things, here's some syntax to get you started. This list of files, right, it contains that baseline script. It contains pre and post deployment things. It is automatically stubbed out for me if I want to create pre and post scripts. There's those programmable objects and the offline schema model we talked about. And then finally, when I created my project, it created some project files for me. If I want to commit these, let's clear again just to clear for demo purposes. I can say I want to commit these. Now, if I prefer to use a text editor for a really detailed commit message, I could just run git commit and it would open my default text editor. If I want to do it in line, I can do -m and say, this is my initial baseline from SQL Change Automation there. Now I have committed these files locally. Now, since Git works client server, these are just local. These haven't been pushed up to my Azure DevOps repo yet. If I want to push them, then I do git and I do push, and that will sync my changes with the server. So now they've been pushed up there. If I go back up into my repo and I click on repos, always make sure you're in the repo you expect to be in. Now it's no longer an empty repo. I have a pubs folder here. I have all of that stuff in my pubs folder. So this has been a very simple introduction to getting things into source control. And so far we've just used the master branch. What if we want to work with branches in a more collaborative way? Well, we totally can, and we're going to look at that next. In Git, I'm going to clear things out, and I'm going to say, I want to start developing a change to this pubs database, and I don't want to just do it in the master branch. I want to use a feature branch for this, and then I'm going to use a pull request to say, hey, I want to merge my changes into master. So that way I have my own private place to work in source control. I can keep my changes there until, that I don't have to share them with that master branch everybody is using until they're ready. And with my feature branch, if I do want to, periodically say, hey, I don't just want these locally, I want to put them on the server, I can push them up to the server too. And only when I do the pull request to say, hey, I want to merge this stuff in, only then do other people have to care about my changes. If they want to come look at my feature branch, they can, but it's not like it's, being in their workspace. So I'm going to do this. I'm going to say get checkout, and I'm going to do get checkout -b. Get checkout says I want to check out a branch, and dash B says I want to create a new branch while I'm checking it out. I could do this in multiple steps, but I think it's really useful to just say, hey, I want to check out a new branch, dash B, a new branch, and I want to name it features, and we're just going to name it new feature. It's a lame name. I know you would do better. So we have now switched to a new branch, right? Courtesy of that dash B named features, new feature. Back in SQL Change Automation, let's make a change in our dev database that it can pick up. So the change we're going to make, let's look at the jobs table here, and let's say we want to add a new column to jobs. You could totally do this with the GUI if you want. I'm just going to do alter table, and then let's do jobs. Thank you, SQL prompt, for making my life easier. I'm going to add a column named last mod. I'm going to make it a date time to. I don't need much precision with this, and I'm going to allow nulls, right? So just adding a column to the jobs table. I could do more if I wanted it to be a more complex change, but we're just really looking at the source control bits. We're keeping it simple. On my generate migrations thing, it says, hey, here's the places you've changed. If I want to examine them, I can. I'm going to just generate the migrations. And this is where it says I am creating some migration scripts and I am putting them into your folders. So we have a new migration script and we've updated the offline schema model for the table that I've modified. Now back in Git, if I do status, it says, hey, some files have changed. You have modified the offline schema model for jobs. Your SQL proj file has changed, and you have a new untracked file, right? So we've modified some files that are already in source control, and then I've added a new file that is that new migration. Right now, I am still in feature/new feature. And an important thing to know about how these branches work is that these changes that I've made, I have not committed these yet. So they are not specific to my branch that I'm in. If I say get checkout master and switch my context to master, it lets me know, by the way, there are still some files that have been modified even though you're switching to master. When I'm in master, if I do status, get status in master, notice that this is just what it looked like when I was in that feature branch. I still have files in my working directory that I haven't committed. And this is actually really convenient that these aren't specific to that branch because maybe I actually did want to commit these somewhere else, right? So now that I'm in master, these are still on the file system. Maybe I actually don't want to work on these right now. Maybe I actually want to see the code that is in master. If I want to do that, if I want to say, hey, okay, yeah, I know I was working on this in another branch. I could commit them in the other branch. I could check out the other branch and then commit them. But what if I'm actually not even ready to commit yet? There is something I can do. I can use get stash. Get stash says, I am going to take your work in progress and I'm going to stash it away. So now, when I do get status, it's like, okay, you do have some untracked files. Because what get stash by itself does is it doesn't stash untracked files. If I look at my get stash list, I have stashed stuff. I have stashed my work in progress, but I didn't stash the untracked files. If I want to stash those, I can use -u with get stash. So I'm going to go ahead and pop them out. When you do get stash pop, it says, okay, your last thing that you stashed, I'm going to pop that out and unstash it. So now notice everything's back. And if I do, I'll clear this out. If I do get stash list now, nothing is stashed. If I want to stash all of those things, I can say get stash -u, and it will stash everything, including my untracked files. I can now see, yeah, I have that stash there. And when I do get status, I can see, yeah, I don't have anything outstanding now. So if you're on a branch and you're not ready to commit, but you want to go work in another branch, you can stash things so that those aren't hanging out still in your working folder. Now, of course, since I have stashed those changes, right, if I look in my working folder, I stashed those migrations that were in progress. All I have now is my baseline. If I go back to SQL Change Automation, and I click on Generate Migrations, what it's doing is it's comparing what is in source control. If I go to migrations, right, it says you can always see where are you looking for the working folder. And I can, show in File Explorer. Okay, it is looking at get pubs, right? And what it does when you generate migrations is it compares what is in that working folder for source control with what's in the database. And it's like, oh, since I stashed the migration script it created for jobs, it's like, oh, you don't have this changed to jobs in source control yet. Right? So I do need to be aware of what I've stashed in the state of my database. It's completely possible for me at this point, if I'm like, oh, I want to leave this copy of the pubs development database the same, and I actually want to work in another copy, I could restore or clone another copy of pubs and, say, okay, I want to work in pubs, other feature name as my development database, and I could associate different development databases with different branches if I wanted. That is up to me as well. Of course, I can just say, oh, I want to unstash my changes here. So let's get back to the branch we want to work in. So I'm going to say get branch just to list my branches. So I don't have to remember the branch name. And then I'll say get checkout features new feature. And then here, if I want to pop things out of my stash here, I can say get stash pop. I can do that, in a different branch than I stashed them in. Now I've got those files back and they're staged, right? So now that the files are back, if I refresh here on my generate migration script, I put the migration files back as well as the offline schema model. It's like, oh, yeah. The state of your development database matches source control now, right? Because it's checking my folder, the files in my folder against the files in my development database. And now if I want to commit them, I'll do get status to make sure I know where I am. I need to stage them. So just like before, get add, I want to stage them all. And if I do get status now, it'll confirm I have one new file, 2 are modified. I can do get commit. I'm going to do a commit message and say added last mod column to jobs table, right? Not perfect, but good enough. And then I've now just committed these locally. If I want to push them to my remote repo, I do get push. Now this is a new feature branch. It doesn't exist on the remote repo yet. I still have a habit of only typing push by itself because the command line is friendly enough that it just tells me the entire command to run if I want to set the upstream branch to the same name as my local branch. So I just do get push. It tells me, oh, here's the syntax you should use to name the remote branch what seems like the right name. I copy it, I paste it, and use that to push to the remote repo. Now, this repo is available in Azure DevOps. And if I refresh in Azure DevOps, it recognizes, hey, you were the one who just pushed this branch. Perhaps you would like to create a pull request to get a review on this and merge it into another branch. Very, very friendly feature. I can also go down to the branches feature and see that, hey, we not only have the master branch, but we also have new features, which I created in a little folder that I named features. So once I go back to repo here, it still very nicely suggests that I could also create it down there if I wanted. But I can use this to get a review. I can set up automation to kick off when I do pull requests, all sorts of cool things about this. And what I'm saying now is, okay, I feel pretty good about these changes. I'm ready for a review, and now I'm ready to share these changes with the main line of code. So I am just going to very quickly complete this pull request. And when I click complete here, I have a couple different options for how I can do this in terms of the commit. I'm just going to go ahead and merge it in. And then I have some options here below in Azure DevOps as well. And I'm going ahead and using this option to delete. After I merge this in, just go ahead and delete the feature branch. I don't need to keep it around forever. I am going to go ahead and do that. But notice that this only deletes the feature branch, of course, on the server. Right now, it got rid of my feature branch. All that's left is master. When I'm down here working, if I do get status, I am still working in that feature branch. So I need to clean it up locally as well if I don't want to do anything else with it. And this is good because, maybe something happens to get rid of your feature branch on the server and it wasn't really what you intended. If you still have a local copy that you haven't cleaned up yet, maybe that's useful to you in some way because the client, making that change at the server didn't automatically make it on my client. So I'm going to check out master. Git checkout master. And then if I want to clean up any branches, I can use git branch to list my local branches. And then if I want to delete a branch, I can say git branch -d and then paste in the branch name and clean out that branch here. And now I can create new branches, still work in them, all sorts of good stuff. I am currently in the master branch. If I want to pull down the changes from the master branch, right? What I did, the workflow I followed so far, my master branch actually is behind because the workflow I did a new feature in a feature branch. I pushed that feature branch up to the server. I merged it into master on the server, but I haven't refreshed master on my local machine. So my master is behind. I need to say get pull if I want to pull down and merge in changes from master currently on the server. So now it says, oh yes, we do have some changes that have occurred in master. And we are going to go ahead. Here's the history of what happened there. We are going to go ahead and merge those in here. So now my master branch is fully up to date with what is online. We have not only the baseline schema, but we also have the incremental change that I did in the migration script. I hope that this has been a good, quick introduction. I find the get command line to be surprisingly friendly and easy to learn. I hope that you like it as well. You do, of course, have the option to use different graphical tools if you wish to work with Git, but I actually think that if you try out the command line, you'll like it as well. I'm Kendra from the Redgate Advocates team. Have a great day.